here. Then we'll go straight to our speakers who will be able to tell us the reason we are having this press conference. My name is Pauline Kada. I'm the Advocacy Marketing Manager at HF Kenya. And the reason why we are here today is we have brought together the civil society organization because we felt that we need to speak on the Mpox issue, the outbreak that is within our community in the countries neighboring us, and also the cases that have happened in Kenya. So briefly, I'll just give a brief. Kenya has reported 5 confirmed Mpox cases, with a steady rise, particularly alarming given the situation in the neighboring countries. The DRC, we have 21,000 cases confirmed and 700 deaths. In Uganda, we have 11 cases confirmed, and despite those ongoing efforts, challenges persist in terms of vaccines and in terms of funding for Mpox. So today, the civil society organizations are here to give a voice on this issue. And one of the issues we are going to cover is on availability and access of the Mpox vaccine in Kenya. Currently, we don't have any vaccines, so we need to speak on that issue. The other one is insufficiency of current sensitization efforts. Not many people know how to detect Mpox, what needs to be done. So we need to speak and need to see sensitization being done. Then the other issue we are going to be addressing is the release and proper management of the epidemic and disaster management fund. And then we also want to call out on the WHO to expedite the approval of additional vaccine candidates, and also appeal to the international community for support in addressing the outbreak. So without further ado, I want to introduce the panelists that we have here today. In front of me, we have Dr. Samuel Kinyanjui, who is the Country Program Director for HF Kenya. We have Mr. Nelson Otoma. Nelson Otoma is the Executive Director for Network of People Living with HIV. Next, we have James Kamau, who is the Executive Director for Kenya Treatment Access Movement, that is KETAM. Next, we have Faith Dumu. Faith is the Advocacy and Communication Manager at the Health NGOs Network, HENET. And next, we have Eva Moy, who is the Director of North Star Alliance. Thank you, and I want to introduce the first speaker to be able to speak to us, Dr. Samuel Kinyanjui. Thank you. Thank you.
So, thank you all. Good morning. Thank you for taking your time to come and be part of this press briefing, and for the members of the state. Thank you very much for coming, because you are the means by which the information reaches the people. Like the good book says, people get lost for lack of information. We take this opportunity to mention very key things about Mpox, that is an outbreak that's ongoing. Mpox has already been declared by Africa CDC as a concern of continental. And after that, WHO already declared it as a pandemic, because it has gone beyond Africa to all the continents in the world. And HF, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, has long championed the equitable access to healthcare, and our commitment is more critical now than ever. We have witnessed the devastating consequences of the vaccine inequity during the COVID pandemic, where financial and socioeconomic impacts were felt globally, not just in Africa. We cannot afford another global shutdown now. Yet, the risk is exactly what Mpox outbreak is. It's an urgency. It's an urgent. We need urgent global collaboration on this matter. Challenges facing Africa on Mpox response. Despite the commendable effort by organizations such as UNICEF, Gavi, WHO, and Africa CDC, Africa's response to Mpox outbreak is still severely hampered by the limited access to vaccine and profound inequity. The vaccine per dose now is $100. $100 putting in Kenya shillings is about 14,000 per dose, as set by the company, making it impossible for many African nations to afford these necessary doses to protect their protection. I'm happy to see my sister from the North Star lands, knowing that the transport corridor has been the biggest, the population working alongside that has been the mostly affected. However, as we know, Mpox's transmission is by contact and by aerosols, so it is very, very infectious. In fact, it is more highly transmittable than COVID, because COVID was only by aerosols. But this one, even skin to skin, because you know the eruptions, the fluid that runs from those Mpox eruptions are infectious by themselves. The high cost, this high cost of vaccine is not only an economic issue, it is a life and death matter. We have seen the devastating effects of vaccine equality during the COVID pandemic. The vaccine holding by wealthy nations resulted in more than 1.3 million preventable deaths. So we lost more than 1.3 million people during COVID, which most likely would have continued to live if they had access to the vaccines in the global south. For instance, as of March 2022, 79% of people living in high-income countries had received at least one dose of COVID vaccine. Compared during the same period, only 14% of people living in the low-income countries, global south, where we belong, Africa and some Asian countries, only 14% had received the vaccine. The socio-economic impact of COVID was felt globally. We risk similar global shutdown if we do not address the Mpox with the same urgency and collaboration. So we wish to make the following call to action. One of them is about technology transfer and fast-tracking approvals to enable vaccine to be produced in various regions in the world. We cannot afford to let history repeat itself. The call to action is clear. We need urgent technology and know-how transfer, including patent waivers, to enable regional vaccine production. These measures will increase vaccine supply, reduce costs, strengthen the global response to Mpox. Addressing, we also need to address the issue of vaccine approval by WHO. We commend WHO for their recent effort to fast-track approval through the emergency use listing process for the approving the current MVB and Mpox vaccine for use in Africa. However, given the recent cases, WHO must now focus on approving the LC16 vaccine. LC16 vaccine has been approved and in use in the US and European countries and remains unapproved for use in Africa, 3 years after the widespread Mpox outbreak. Furthermore, we urge WHO to expedite the review and approval of other viable Mpox vaccine options to enhance affordability by increasing the number of manufacturers in the market. But 3, call to action. On the issue of vaccine stockpiling, we must also address the issue of vaccine stockpiling and holding by wealthier nations. The Mpox vaccine is already vaccine is already prohibitively expensive, and mainly because the rich countries are buying in large doses. As a result, whatever is available to come to Africa is limited, and therefore the price remains very high. The number of people needing vaccination across Africa is immense. We appreciate the nations that have donated vaccine to Africa. We call on them to significantly increase their contribution and ensure that these vaccines reach the countries that need them most. We already know that the East and Central Africa countries are the most heavily affected. DRC, Burundi, Uganda, and Kenya are in the region and therefore need the vaccines most. Cameroon and so on. Only through coordinated global effort can we hope to control this outbreak and prevent it from becoming a nationwide catastrophe. Number 3, need for international collaboration. Call action number 3 is that we need international collaboration. Finally, international collaboration is not just desirable, it is essential. Mpox vaccine does not respect borders, and if we allow the outbreak to escalate, its consequences will be felt globally. We urge global leaders to prioritize equitable vaccine access, work together to prevent repeat of the disastrous outcomes that we saw during COVID-19 pandemic. The lives of millions depends on our immediate decision and actions. To the Kenya government, while global efforts are essential, the Kenya government must take proactive steps to secure Mpox vaccine and prevent further spread of the virus. Although Kenya shillings 1.6 billion has been allocated to address the Mpox outbreak, only a paltry 7.4% of the budget is dedicated to infection prevention. This means that if we do not invest further in the interventions to prevent, it means that this disease can become a disaster in Kenya. We all know that prevention is better than cure. However, it is not entirely clear if a specific portion of these funds has been set aside for securing the vaccines. So it's not even clear from the budget how much of this money will be used to buy the vaccines. And we know buying vaccines is one thing, ensuring that's available, transporting to where it's needed, and administering the vaccine is a different ball game altogether. We also know that, and today when I was coming here, I used a taxi, and I asked the driver what he knows about Mpox, and he asked me, what is that? So it means that our community don't even know that we have an outbreak in our hand, and therefore, if they don't know that an outbreak exists, they don't even know how to prevent. Even if they carry somebody with the pustules in their car, they'll do nothing about it. They will report nowhere, they will not take their car for disinfection, they will also not take any action for themselves. It can spread easily because the communities are not sensitized or informed on how to prevent the infection. To effectively combat this crisis, a more significant portion of the budget needs to be allocated to purchasing the vaccine and to prevention interventions. Prioritizing funding for vaccine procurement will be a crucial step in protecting Kenyan population and mitigating the outbreak impact. As we gather here today on September 18th, let us commit to taking meaningful steps towards handling this crisis. The time to act is now. African Mpox response demands urgent global action, and we must race to meet the challenge before it is too late. We know the numbers are rising. I think in DRC we have more than 21, now heading to 22,000 people who have been confirmed cases, and we've lost more than 700 people. Actually, the actual number this morning are 724. As for that from the WHO update. We know that WHO update may be a couple of days behind schedule, so it may be more. We are edging towards the 800 people dying. The Mpox virus is, for your interest, you may know that the Mpox virus is part of the Mpox family. They are a family called Poxviridae. And the same group of virus, the other members of this family are vaccinia, the virus used to vaccinate against smallpox. And smallpox itself is a member of this family. Cowpox is a member of this family. The most lethal, of course, is smallpox that was eliminated early in the 1980s. That tells you the potential of what Mpox can be. You have to look at the characteristic of what smallpox was, a pandemic that killed millions in the past. And because now it has moved to the person-to-person transmission, then it is really a very dangerous stage for us. We may be saying Kenya has only 5 cases, but we know that the transmission of Mpox is higher than the transmission of COVID. Therefore, we need to take very severe, quick action now, because we have seen most of them have been in the transport corridor, but these people in the transport corridor, they live with us, they sleep where we sleep along the way, and we are on those roads every other day. So the moment it gets into the communities itself, then it will have reached will have caused the red line that we may not be able to stop the flood waters. We may start experiencing what is going on now in DRC. So having said that, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the members of the Fourth Estate for coming. You are the partner and the highway to the minds of our communities. Please educate them. And my colleagues who have come, thank you for standing up strong and being the voice of the voiceless. Asante.
Thank you, Dr. Kinyaji, for that brief. I would ask our next speaker. I would kindly request that we take down the questions that we have. We will respond at the end of the press. So I request Mr. Nelson Mutoma to come and talk on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nelson Mutoma. I work at Mpox. For those who don't know Mpox, Mpox is a molecular body of persons, individuals living with HIV. It started a long time ago, around 1999, but was registered in 2003. Of course, as you remember, during that time, HIV infection was a health sentence because there was no treatment. But science worked very well, and now there is treatment. So people are living much longer. Actually, the problem we are now having in Kenya is those who are aging with HIV who are presenting with other non-community conditions. But that is a subject for another day. So I wanted to thank the AHF family, the AHF Kenya family, for allowing me to join this discussion and their briefing, and also to join Dr. Kinyaji in welcoming the media persons, because they will help us put this out there. But I'm speaking particularly on behalf of persons living with HIV, who all of us know are vulnerable. Once the HIV is in the body, it's a lifelong condition, it's a latent virus. You may be on treatment, but that treatment need not stop. And of course, for those who have been following the media, you recently raised an alarm on the emergence of advanced HIV disease. And that alarm on advanced HIV disease is because of 2 reasons. One, we have people with HIV who are delaying treatment. And we also have those who are getting new treatment and interrupting that treatment. Again, that is a subject for another day. So today, I just thank the team for having me to address this significant issue that is emerging among us. First of all, I want to say that the moment any condition comes, and here we are talking about pandemic preparedness and prevention. So the moment any condition comes and it is viral, it raises a lot of anxiety and fear among people with HIV, because as you are all aware, viruses relate. So if today in this room we get to have access to this Mpox we are talking about, the consequences or the health impact on persons living with HIV will be much greater, because already you are dealing with people with compromised immunity. Therefore, we see this as something that is urgent and an urgent threat to the community, particularly those with compromised immunity, especially children living with HIV. And therefore, we think that it is important to sensitize not only Kenyans, but particularly those who are vulnerable. In this case, I'm pointing out people with HIV, because that's the constituency that I work with. Now, in sensitizing and educating communities on Mpox, then we will be dealing with the fear, the anxiety, and the misinformation that may come in. You also aware that most of these people who are HIV also travel to conferences, and this is a condition that has been associated with the travels. And you also know that as we speak right now, the Kenya Ministry of Health confirms there are cases in Kenya, including presumptive cases, suspected cases, but also we know in our neighboring countries, DRC is particularly very much affected, and you know DRC, you just cross Uganda and you are there as a community. So let me begin by highlighting the significant gap in the current response, and we believe that it is happening without adequate community sensitization. The Ministry of Health goes to Twitter and calls those press conferences, but I think we need a dedicated team to reach out to communities, particularly people with HIV, to educate them. First of all, on how to prevent this, but also to alleviate the anxiety and the fear that is now coming in. So we appreciate the Ministry of Health, but also call upon the government to immediately embark on sensitizing communities about Mpox, and then letting communities also sensitize their other teams. And this sensitization need to be coupled with increased surveillance and testing, as undetected Mpox cases heighten the risk of transmission to vulnerable populations, including those who are HIV. So I think when we deal with diseases, and Dr. Kinyanjui has already addressed this, sometimes we want to wait for the last stage. When you see people who have skin lesions and swellings in the body with Mpox, those are the latest stages. People can present with fever, people can present with other, like sweats, other symptoms, but let us not wait until they reach the level of ambulatory or hospital engagement. That's what we are talking about here. So if the government is keen with surveillance and testing, then we are going to detect cases before they advance to get what we are seeing through the media. Turning to the issue of vaccines, and of course, Dr. Kinyanjui has highlighted this, we are asking the Ministry of Health to collaborate with the World Health Organization and other international partners to secure vaccines for the Kenyan population. And if those vaccines come, I think like we did with COVID, persons living with HIV need to be prioritized because of the reasons I've explained. If you are dealing with people with already compromised immunity. We have also been told by African CDC and World Health Organization that this is more prevalent among sex workers, because this is something that cannot also be transmitted through sexual transmission, and of course cross-border and people who travel, and those are also teams to prioritize for the vaccine alongside people living with HIV. Now, we understand that the Ministry of Health and their partners may be having challenges in terms of budgets and also human resources for health. Staffing is limited, and that is why we think it is important to emphasize the importance of utilizing existing community networks. So we from network also have a network, a countrywide network of communities. So once few teams or leaders within the NEPA are sensitized on Mpox. The Ministry of Health need just to develop technical guidance and policies, and these communities, through their networks, then can reach out to their peers and other community members so that they are sensitized further, and that will be easing the burden on the Ministry of Health. So that is an opportunity that we also offer, that we can partner with the Ministry of Health and through our networks give people who can be educated and trained, and then they further sensitize communities, particularly people who have HIV at the lower level. We have also come just from another pandemic called COVID. Actually, right now we are in the recovery because of the effect that it brought in. But we emphasize the urgency of these actions because without shift and disease measures, we risk endangering the lives of people with HIV and undoing the progress made in the fight against HIV. We saw the effect and impact of uncontrolled pandemic during COVID. And as you are aware, whether it was through containment or lockdowns and so on and so forth, the poor and particularly poor people really suffer because they lost income and they really also faced certain levels of stigmatization. So that's why we are saying even when a virus comes like this, people look critically at persons doing HIV. So during that time, people avoided hospitals. I'm sure if today prominent cases of Mpox appear in Baghdad or Kenyatta, people will try to avoid that. When we do that, then we are feeling new cases of HIV infections. And of course, healthcare workers go to other conditions and therefore neglect the existing conditions. So if you have been in Kenya, you know that the period 2021, 2022, in the height of COVID, even cases of new infections among mother-to-child transmission of HIV increased. And that people also defaulted. When people default, they become unsuppressed, and then chances of transmitting the virus increases. So we should not allow Mpox to do what COVID did, that after it, new HIV infections are on the rise, and people also get to transmit the virus. Therefore, we are happy to call on the Ministry of Health to make sure that as this new pandemic also comes in and sensitizes communities, what is needed to prevent and treat and manage HIV is also not interfered with and supported. And therefore, this is the time to promote combination prevention, including voluntary medical, bill circumcision, PrEP, and harm reduction services, so that we don't relent on our commitment to fight HIV, even in as much as we are also sensitizing communities and educating them on Mpox. In terms of public health crisis and preventing this pandemic from spreading further, we cannot afford to repeat the challenges we had with Mpox. And we know that at the moment the stakes are incredibly very high, and we require strategic coordinated response from the government and the global community. So sometimes we talk about the Ministry of Health. People think we are talking about the National Ministry of Health, but we also mean county ministries of health, particularly counties in the border. They need to put in place swift action and a coordinated response so that they monitor and support the National Ministry of Health in that surveillance that we are talking about. I moving to conclude, but I also want to assure persons living with HIV that yes, we have a new pandemic emerging among us. This is the time to renew your commitment for treatment. Those who test themselves and know their status need to stay on treatment. For those who are virtually suppressed, even if there is the threat of Mpox, the effect will not be very dire. But at the moment, for those who stay out of treatment, I think that would be having more consequences. And therefore, we also ask the Ministry of Health and the Government of Kenya for a comprehensive action to to enhance community awareness, scale up testing, secure vaccines, and have a clear focus on those most at risk, including sex workers and people living with HIV. And I would say that we have a network in the name of network, a national network with county and sub-county structures that can be utilized to educate communities, particularly people living with HIV, not just to make sure at the moment they adhere to their treatment, but also to make sure that they understand Mpox, this new virus, and that will be important in ensuring that there is no misinformation, there is no anxiety, there is no stigma, and there is no fear. And if we work together, communities, ministries of health and the government, then we are going to defeat this pandemic. Lastly, and more importantly, pandemics will always be coming. And I think it is the level of preparedness for prevention and education of communities that is the most important thing. So with that, thank you very much. I'll be happy to replace any question that I can address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nelson. Kindly take your questions down. I'll repeat again so that they'll be addressed at the end. I want to introduce our next speaker, Mr. James Kamau, who is the Executive Director of the Kenya Treatment Access Movement. He's going to be talking to us about funding. Do we have funding as a country? What is happening or what needs to be done? Can you do this?
Thank you very much. Thank you to my colleagues who have already spoken. They have mentioned quite a number of things that need to be indicated. But most and foremost, what requires to be done is funding. You heard Dr. Kinyanjui telling us the WHO and the other development partners are looking for funding. Where do we get our own funding as a country? What have we done? What did we learn from COVID in terms of funding? These are issues that we actually need to look at. Now, we had, there's a fund of 1.6 billion, which was put into the national budget. It is usually allocated at the beginning, but the subsequent supplementary budget, it is removed outright. And I think that is something that we actually need to look for. One of the things that we really need to do when we're talking about funding is that we went backwards, and that has been mentioned by both the speakers, in terms of socioeconomic, the impact that was there. We went backwards. So the pandemic is not just about the disease or the people who are, it affects every single Kenyan, because a lot of money is lost, the revenues are lost. COVID came, hotels shut for nearly 2 years. That meant that all that population which work in that sector, them and their families went hungry. So I think the issue of preparedness needs to be done. Now, I'm pained. I'm pained by the fact that we tried to address all this. In 2022, National Treasury developed a public finance management, or rather a disaster management fund regulations, That was in 2022. To date, it has never taken off. So the question is, what is the level of seriousness of those in authority to be able to mitigate into this? We now have Mpox, and we know you've just been told it will make COVID look like a small child. That's how bad it will be. We need to be extremely prepared. And for it to be prepared, we need every effort done by both the leaders, starting from the president, the Senate, the parliamentary, the parliament, to make sure that we have these issues into place. Again, you had, and I want to emphasize, we are on a trajectory of having to put UHC in place, Universal Health Coverage. As we are talking, they are trying to launch the SHA. There is absolutely nothing in that SHA on disaster management. Yet, we all know if you get Mpox, where are you taken? Are we together? So, I mean, this needs to be put together, and we need to learn. And then lastly, coming from a finance point of view, we need to mitigate. We know we had COVID millionaires. So we need to be ready to mitigate Mpox millionaires.
Thank you so much, Mr. James Kano. We will go to the next speaker, who is Faith Dumu. Faith is the Advocacy and Communication Manager at Health NGOs Network. This is a network that brings us all together, and we want to know as HENET where we stand as CSOs and what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Good morning, everyone. And to the panelists, I really appreciate and I appreciate AHF for bringing us together today, but also appreciate also the speakers who've been here before me. Let me start from where Kamau left at. A very important question, but also a very important concern. So from the point of the Health NGOs Network, one of the key things that would like to acknowledge, want to acknowledge that yes, there's work which is going on, and we acknowledge that we've seen the Ministry of Health speaking, and we're also cognizant of the fact that the Ministry of Health has formed a task force on Mpox. However, having said that, there's a bit of a statistic that I want to mention. Bwana Nelson mentioned about the impact of people living with HIV, but also importantly, people who have issues with the immunity. But it's important to note that 41% of reported cases are of children below the age of 15. So very important to note this. Also important to note that of all reported cases, 63% are men. And I'm a woman standing here to say that, but that is statistics, that is what has been there. So it is very important for us to ask ourselves then, of this population 15 years and below, what can be done? This is what has been reported across Africa, but we also have another 63%. And looking at the health-seeking behaviors in the country, we need to ask ourselves then, what are we going to do differently to ensure that men who are not going to facilities start going to facilities? Having said that about the statistics, I would like to start from the point of pandemic preparedness and response. It is very important for us to not only look at Mpox, yes, it was declared as a public health threat by the Africa CDC, but also WHO. But it is very important then for us to ask ourselves, what are the preparedness measures that we are having? And starting from a CSO point of view, I think there's quite a lot that needs to be done in terms of pandemic preparedness. As we speak now, if I ask you what are the prevention measures that you know, I'm sure we are with the further stage and there's a lot of information which comes to your hands, but I'm sure that probably more than half of this room will not know what prevention measures are there. So how prepared are we to handle matters prevention? It is very important for us to, one, sensitize the population. And the easiest way to sensitize the population, as Nelson had mentioned, is working with organized teams, and civil society are part of these teams. We can easily, through the programs that we run, reach out to the masses, reach out to the citizens, and pass information on prevention, and also provide referral pathways. Because when we know prevention, when we know the signs and symptoms, we pass that information, and that information will guide someone to go and seek services, but also for us to have that kind of a conversation. It is also important for us to see what lessons can we pick from COVID-19. Yes, Dr. Kinejo and Nelson have spoken strongly around the vaccines, and they are very important. But we also need to remember a very important lesson that we learned from COVID-19 prevention, which was the personal role, and that was basic prevention measures. We spoke about hand washing, we spoke about maintaining physical distance, and that played a big role, including we were taking a lot of, I think we took a lot of ginger and a lot of garlic and a lot of, there's quite a lot that we did. And it is important now to ask ourselves, what are the homegrown solutions that we can have within us? As I get to winding up, it's very important for us to acknowledge, and I would like the Ministry of Health and other key critical players, for us to all acknowledge the role of collective action. Yes, the Ministry of Health has a critical role that they play, but as civil society and communities, there's also a very important role that we play, which comes in prevention, which comes in referrals, which comes in sensitization. And that's a very important role that needs to acknowledge, and we get enabled. And that's a point that I would like to move to the Ministry of Health. And also, importantly, before I sit, we remember how we had a lot of sensitization on updates and reports on COVID-19. That's a lesson that the ministry can pick and package information for us so that we understand what is happening, including border point populations, what information are we passing on, including for us to even understand and know where do I go for testing. Then lastly, it's a call to the National Treasury. We know that the ministry has been allocated money for the response. It is important for Treasury to release and disperse the funds on a timely manner so that we are able to respond and to prevent and be prepared for the current situation we're talking about Mpox, but also for any pandemic that we might face in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith. I hope you're noting your
Questions down?
which we'll take at the end of the discussion. Next, I'd want to invite Eva Moy. Eva is the director of North Star Alliance. This is an organization that has been working with the truck drivers in our borders. She will tell us the status of what is currently happening on our border. Are we safe? Is there any screening being done, or what is not being done? Thank you.
Thank you so much, AHF, for the invitation and for this opportunity to share a few concerns and some information. North Star Alliance, for those who do not know, is an organization that provides quality health care to mobile workers and the communities they interact with. We work at the crossroad of disease and mobility. Diseases travel when people travel along the highways, And so we ensure that infectious diseases are not spreading from one country to the other and within the countries. Now we know from statistics that out of the 5 Mpox cases in Kenya, 2 of them are truck drivers and 1 of them is a partner to the truck driver. Truck drivers are at risk of infectious diseases, of contracting infectious diseases, because they move from one country to the other, and many of them are going to DRC even today. Now, my worry is that because of their high mobility and the fact that they must interact with people, they must eat, they must buy goods from traders, food and other items that they require. They will go to shops and buy things, and then items that will also be shared with other people. And we know, as has been said by my colleague speakers here, that this disease is highly contagious, infectious, and so even the items that they touch will be touched by other people. They'll go to the restaurants and, they use plates and cups and spoons, and these will be touched by the waiters and the waitresses, go to the kitchen, and that disease can be spread very easily. They must interact with other people and go back to their families, and what will happen then? The infections will go to the communities, to their families, and everywhere. So it's likely that the spread, will be quite a serious problem. Now, we set up clinics along the transport corridors so that at least the mobile people, like the truckers and the people who are around the places where they park, can access health care. And I can tell you today that we have received many truckers coming into the clinics. Some of them, a number of them, don't have any information about Mpox. They are worried that if this is an infectious disease like COVID, and we hear that it's worse than COVID in terms of infection, how will their work, be? Will the borders be closed and then they lose their jobs? This is one thing they are worried about. But above that, they are also worried about the information. How do they protect themselves? Where do they go for, for screening and services like that? Now, at the border points, I want to be very honest with you that some of these truckers are passing through the borders without adequate screening or any screening. And you know what happens is, if you know somebody who wants to pass quickly, you can just pass through. So that is a big problem that I would like it to have addressed as quickly as possible if we want to protect the citizens in our country. Because Congo is one of the roads along the Northern Transport Corridor, a major highway where, trade is done, and this trade facilitation between all these countries. If they are going to Congo, then this disease is likely to really be a serious problem in our country. So surveillance is a big thing, and I would call for all efforts to be made that surveillance becomes something that is taken so seriously at the border points and at other points where people are passing through, especially those who are coming from other countries. So enhancement of surveillance and coordination, my colleague Faith has mentioned this. We cannot succeed in isolation. We have to work with other people, and I think the government is in a good place and better situated to coordinate us. Disseminate correct information as urgently as can be, especially to these people who are most at risk. They don't have the information, most of them don't. They are getting pieces of information from the media and from other places, and I must say, like Faith did, that there are some efforts that have been made, because I know when the trucker who contracted Mpox in Nakuru, that was my Naivasha sub-county, when that case was detected very quickly, the county government, called us as stakeholders and started and gave us some information and, disseminating information about what should be done. But there's still more to be done and a lot more to be done. Make available resources for protective equipment, and also advocate for efficient and effective use of available resources, if there are any. And then engage all the stakeholders as quickly as possible. They are in the case of where I work, in the space where I work, they are the transport owners, the owners of the transport companies. And I know at the moment, I don't think anything is happening there. The drivers should have information from all quarters. And then involve also the associations that deal with these people and the unions. I would call the government really to do better at the border points. I know in Malaba something is happening, there's screening going on, but there are still people passing through. And I say this again, honestly and candidly, because I know, I get this information from the people who are concerned, that there are still people who are passing through without being screened. What does that mean for this infection? What does it mean for the spread of diseases like Mpox in Kenya? Ensure that at least there are adequate staff at the border points, and everyone, whether they pay money, right, or whatever, everybody is taken through this screening and resources are available. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would now want to open the floor for questions. And I would also want to pass the apology of Agri Aluso, that's the Director of Africa Region for the Pandemic Action Network. He had an urgent travel out of the country, but we will be able to share a brief with all of you. So any questions for the panelists? Any questions? Or something you want to clarify?
When checking on your notes, I'd like to just make one comment on an issue that I noticed as panelists we forgot to mention. It's the issue of what is ongoing internationally, international pandemic treaty that's being negotiated at WHO level, globally by all countries. I want to mention here I think around 11 of the international negotiating body, IPN, and countries are still yet to agree, mainly because of the same reason we are seeing us having with Mpox. I think Mpox has come just to show us that as a world, we talk a lot, but we are not yet. We've been seeking to work collaboratively, but we are yet to collaborate. You can notice that on the issue of Mpox, the issue of vaccine, is still the vaccine holding by the rich countries, which was still the problem we had during COVID, and which is one of the sticky points that is stopping the vaccine treaty to be agreed upon, number one. Because the issue of equity is something that the rich countries are yet to agree. Number two, that's the sticky point for the treaty, which is still a problem in COVID, in Mpox, is funding. You notice that the rich countries, they are funded, they have stockpiles of vaccines. The African countries, they are yet to vaccinate anyone. And you know the epicenter of the Mpox pandemic is actually Africa. The other thing, the number 3 issue that is also a sticky point, is how to share revenue that's generated from the materials, genetic materials. Mpox, the monkeypox, they call it Mpox, but it's monkeypox, is originally from Africa. So how did they create the vaccines? How did they create? They took the virus from where? From Africa. They created the vaccine. Now they are refusing to share the vaccine. They are not even providing funding that's generated, because they're selling the vaccine. 1 dose for $100. And it's supposed to, ideally, the negotiation is that part of that money should be coming back to fund the community from where the genetic material was sourced, which is DRC Congo, is Cameroon, is Burundi. Those are the people where the people are dying. This is the reason why the international treaty has stalled, because the West, as you can see, they are not being very good. So I felt that in the heat of this moment, I think it's very important to address this. And the countries, particularly in the Global South and in Africa, need to be very, very solid on this one. You cannot come to our place, get genetic material, create pharmaceuticals, create vaccines, and then we cannot share in the proceeds of these vaccines. And finally, the states, I'd like to call to the state, not just Kenya, that they request, they allow other players in the international negotiating body, not just states, because a lot of the time the states may not have the resources to do research and go to the negotiating body very, very well organized. We notice that countries from the West, they come with a panel of lawyers, economists and so on in the international negotiating body. They are very well informed. While we notice that the countries from Africa, most of them, they may get technical people, they are not coordinated, they may not have the backup lawyer, they may not have had the time to prepare, and that's why we find that in the negotiating table, the Global South is always playing catch up. So this is the call that we're making, that the states get resources, requests for support from others. Civil society is part of them. Research organizations is another place where they can get they can get the strength to negotiate from a position of strength rather than playing catch up. For example, in Kenya, the LSK, I don't know whether the lawyer from the LSK are part of the panel that goes as a Kenyan delegation to the negotiation. I think most of the time it's just technical people, and when we are going to face, and these are treaties, are law, so we should be getting legal minds in this space, so that we negotiate from a position of strength and understanding. Thank you.
So hi everyone. Hi everyone. My name is Masi Wanjiko. Hi everyone. Okay, my name is Masi Wanjiko and I work with IRF, Ambassador for Youth and Adolescent Reproductive Health Program. Basically, we just do a lot of advocacy and also making sure adolescents and young people access the SRHR and HIV needs. So I have 2 questions, rather 3. So 2 are for Nelson. So Nelson, I know you're an expert in leading communities. And one question that I have, youths are confused and worried on Mpox transmission. We don't know anything, and we like to be included, and also to be able to cascade this information. How do you think we can do that? And then the second question, are hospitals, when PNHIV is good to access their treatment and also information, are they being given information on Mpox? And then I have a question rather to the rest of the panelists. The panelists here, Dr. Kinyanjui, Faith, Mr. Kamau, all the panelists, what are you doing to ensure that the ministry includes and involves youth in the response of Mpox? Thank you.
Those ones, they will answer. I wanted to say something on the issues of vaccine. We had a hype, and a big hype. And it was led from the very top on vaccine manufacturing. And there was a big issue where Moderna were the ones who were going to start vaccine manufacturing. But lo and behold, sometime early this year, Moderna picked up their things and bolted. They fired, they went. This is because of two reasons. One, it was the market segment. It is not locally viable to manufacture vaccine for Kenya alone. It requires the region and the issue. And that issue of the market of the region is a very dicey issue. And that is why you find that there are very few companies, including pharmaceutical companies, that are able to stay afloat because they are able to get to the other countries. We have universal pharmaceuticals. One of the biggest things they rely on is the Global Fund and the other countries to buy from them other than Kenya because of the market. Two, why did Moderna vote? The government had promised to do and take several measures to put into place so that they can start manufacturing. They did not adhere to it. The government did not take it very seriously. And just like I told you earlier on, the Disaster Finance Management Bill, which was started in 2022, is still a draft up to now. So the question is, how do we get the people at the helm of the country to be able to understand that pandemic is a big issue? That is the health pandemic. Of course, there are other pandemics, corruption. Pandemic. How do we do about it? It's very important. We need to emphasize on that.
Thank you, Kamau, and thank you for the two questions I have. And the third one, which is for everyone, so everyone will respond to you. Yeah, young people, youth. When we say youth, the youth sometimes that title of youth is confusing. Kenya has a youthful president, and I also have a board that probably me and Dr. Kinejui are the youngest there, so we are the youthful members of that board. But I think the point is, all Kenyans are confused about this Mpox. So far, there has not been any comprehensive, coordinated, and systematic way of educating communities, including the media. So we are here to tell the Ministry of Health and the government to have a strategic, coordinated, and structured way of reaching out to everyone, including young people. For young people, for that to happen, yeah, I know there are quite a number in this room are Gen Z, but we also don't fear telling them that for the government to reach you out in a coordinated and structured way, you also must be coordinated and structured. So the issues of leaderless may not apply here, but the point is, if the youths have their own network with their leaders, then it is through that youth movement and network that their leaders can do what we are calling the Ministry of Health also to do with the people living with HIV through their network. Of course, the Ministry of Health and Government may not reach all the youth, but if they identify key leaders of the youth through their networks. They can educate them, sensitize them, and then they reach out to their peers. So that's how it should be done. And the second point is what you have raised. I started by saying that for those who have HIV, because already they are vulnerable, in cases of Mpox, then the consequences, the health consequences may be dire. So it is important. This is an opportunity because for those who have HIV, they must go to a health facility at least. Even if you give them, for the people who are not newly diagnosed, pregnant women, sometimes even they're told to go weekly. For others, they go monthly because they want to be stabilized on medicine. For those who are established or stable in medicine, sometimes they're given pills for 3 months, 2, sometimes 4. But that is an opportunity because these are people who go to health facilities and they must go to collect their medicine. So if the facility can have a situation where the moment you step there, you want to collect your ARVs, but you are also sensitized. Please adhere to your ARVs, but there's also this Mpox that you need to prevent. That would be a desirable opportunity. And that's what we are calling the Ministry of Health and NASPO, to sensitize people who dispense these medicines so that anybody who steps in a health facility is sensitized on Mpox. And the general question, which is a repeat of the first one, yes, we welcome that young people need to be involved and to be engaged. Before that is done, it's not just involved, you make sure that they have the capacity, they have the resources, and they are empowered enough to understand what we are talking about here in terms of Mpox. So thank you very much for emphasizing the point that in the health facilities, persons living with HIV need to be sensitized on any pandemic that comes. In this case, we're talking about the Mpox that is the current one.
Maybe to respond to the question on behalf of the panelists. In any situation where you have a problem with the pandemic, number one question you need to address is the source of the infection. So that source, if you contain it, then you protect the community from further infection. Number two is getting the correct information to the community, because these are human beings with the abilities and knowledge to be able to take care of themselves. You need the correct information, which prevents, immunizes them against misinformation and fear mongering. So I think I want to take a slightly different route from my chairman on the issue of getting the disease involved. I think they don't need structures and leaders to get information. There are platforms that they have identified where they check every time. We have social media of all types. But I think the ministry and us, when we get the correct information, we're able to post this information in these platforms using validated accounts. Then the young people can trust that this is the correct. So I was saying that we are, the young people have identified platforms through which we can reach most, not all of them. And I think instead of us trying to force them to the older structured way of living, we need to move to the new, which is using social media accounts. You make sure that it is the Ministry of Health, they have an account that's validated to be able to provide this information. And they can use whatever means they have. But I think X is one of the platforms that the young people are very, very comfortable with. And therefore we can reach most of them. And let us not try and box them into the old structured way of doing things where people have to be physical, have to be present, have to be representative. And you know what happens when information is passed from one person to the other? We all know about the broken down. That things will change along the way, and they may twist the information to the way that's not visible. The other thing I would like to say that I think the communication department of our institutions and the Ministry of Health is very clear. The information need to not be threatening the community. We need to provide information, and we don't need to wait until there's a pandemic to be able to communicate on it. We should establish a routine, whether it's a weekly brief, whether it's a monthly, 2 weekly brief, whether it's a monthly update, so that people will be looking forward to the next brief and know that if you want the truth about anything, this is where you can get the information. And it should be an interactive way, not a one-way traffic, allowing the young people also to ask questions that are important to them, so that health officials can be able to provide the information to the specifics that the communities are seeing. Some of the things is that you may be seeing those postular diseases across, the ministry does not know. But if the people have an access to such a platform, they can keep sending the information and say, hey, we are seeing this, we've taken a picture of this, we are sending what is going on, what is this, what can we do? I think we also need that interactive platform between the people and the authorities in healthcare to make sure that the communication is both ways and it's trust, the people can trust. I think that can be a cheaper and an effective way of handling this. Local production, I think we need to go beyond the Kenyan government. I think the local production is a bigger animal than the national government can handle by itself. This needs to go to the regional economic blocks who can sustain a market and guarantee a market that can interest a company to set up local production. And at the higher level, it needs to go all the way to the African Union. Now we hope our Honorable Gwambo may get into this chairmanship. Maybe we may be able to marshal the team for such. Because if the African Union can guarantee X number of doses, the more we buy, then an industrialist may be interested. An industrialist may be interested in coming to do this. So what I've done there is what we do to infectious disease control. And look, then the problem is Asante. Yes.
And thank you, Mercy, for the question. Maybe just to also add on. Maybe to also add on what Dr. Kienji has mentioned, I think we have quite a number of opportunities, and one of them is where the young people have a strength, and that's in the social media. You understand how you can mobilize yourselves, but also mobilize people without necessarily bringing them to rooms. And I think that's an avenue that can be pursued both by the organizations who are seated at the panel, but also by the Ministry of Health. The other avenues is, again, the Ministry of Health is leading a task force on Mpox. And that task force has different players, including different ministries represented and different players. So it's also very important for us to see how do we have a united voice, to see how do we have more young people in that platform, but most importantly is to see how do we get information which is simplified in a way that a citizen can take action. Because at times the information, and I acknowledge the Ministry of Health has been passing quite a bit of information, but at times when you look at it, you're not so certain what you're going to do with it. So probably there's also an important need for that information to be simplified in a way that as a young person, as a child, as a man, as a technical player, that we can package and so that we are able to simplify the message in a way that it can be consumed for prevention, but also for us to inform others and have collective action. So I think those are avenues that we can pursue, but really appreciate the questions that you'd asked. And maybe just to touch on what Eva had mentioned, she's mentioned the transit population, which is not just the truck driver, but the truck drivers have their crew, but they also have the people who serve them. And you'll realize anytime you're on the road, you'll find there are the hawkers who sell the water, the energy drinks to the truck drivers. And we also have now the truck drivers and their crew. So also to see how do we involve the young people in packaging this information, because these people are on transit, but they have those stops. So what information can they have, and how do we use also the transit population to be agents of change? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Moniki. I work with the National Organization of Peer Educators. Thank you. Maybe I can just speak without it. My name is Peter Moniki Maura. I work with National Organization of Peer Educators. At NOPE, we mainly deal with key population, people who are living with HIV, people who inject drugs, and female sex workers. So I have a question to Mr. James Kamau, because Mr. James Kamau has talked about funding. The panelists have talked about vaccine, screening, sensitization, and dissemination of information to the public. But all of this will point to funding. Do we have the resources to do all this that we are requesting? Do we have the resources? Do we have a budget for all this? I'm aware the government has a budget for emergency. But emergency is into many categories. Like recently we had floods, so the same money was used to floods. So can we come together as CSO in the health space and advocate for budget that is set aside specifically for diseases, for pandemics? Because because you remember during COVID, the reason as why we have a lot of COVID millionaire is because there was no budget for COVID. They had to do a budget realignment. And when we do a budget realignment, there's no framework, a good framework for accountability. So can we push the government to come up with a budget line that is specifically for emergency and response? So my question to Mr. James will be, where are we in terms of budget for these epidemics and response? And if we don't have a budget, what are we doing as CSOs in the health space? Thank you.
Thank you for the question from my colleague from NOPE. I don't think I did answer your question, and I'm going to answer it again. Treasury put up a draft on public finance management, which is for disaster management fund, regulations, a draft, in 2022. To date, it has not seen anything. So yes, what can you do? We need to push for that draft regulation to go through so that it is actualized. And it is until it's actualized that we will be able to ask for monies to be allocated, and they are there permanently. Like I told you, yes, we had 1.6 billion in the very beginning, but lo and behold, when we started doing budget adjustments, the money went. And that was why in the last floods, we didn't have any money, yet it had been allocated. So one of the things that we actually need to do is make sure that this fund is not just there, but it is ring-fenced so that it is not misused by others. And this issue of funds, like I told you, that is where this fund, I told you about the COVID millionaires, Mpox millionaires. So that's why it needs to be completely put into place. And this management fund needs to be, the regulator needs to be independent. Thank you.
Good morning. Okay, I'm David Onuma. I'm an online noise maker. I make a lot of noise online as advocacy works and anything advocacy. So my question is, when you tweet about something vaccine online, most of people who are online, especially Twitter, there are people who call themselves woke. So when you tweet anything vaccine, they'll counter you. They'll say that vaccines are a way of controlling population, that there's that narrative that these vaccines are being used by other powers to control population, especially in Africa. Like recently, I was doing a campaign that was trying to sensitize people to take the HPV vaccine, that's the human papilloma vaccine that is for the cervical cancer in women. And most of the responses that you'd get when you put up a tweet is that this is when a girl, because it's taken between 10 to 14, mostly within girls, then they'll tell you that when a girl takes that vaccine, then they won't be able to reproduce in the future. So there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation as far as vaccines are concerned. And then when you come into prevention of Mpox, then you'll have to bring in another vaccine. So I'm foreseeing a future where there are going to be a lot of resistance, especially for the woke side of the population, that they're like maybe university students, so they've gone past university education and such. So how do we make sure that this misinformation or disinformation is done away with, so that we give this vaccine to as many as we can? Thank you.
So David, thank you very much for that question. I think what we need to do is get you and others additional facts about vaccines, how they work, and other facts that can counter that level of misinformation. One of the things I'd like to say, and I mentioned during COVID time, was that while they may be saying the vaccine had to control population, prevent, basically to sterilize people so that they do not, that information is materially false. Number one is that the vaccine has nothing to do with the development of the sexual reproductive system. Number two, and very important fact, is that why do you think the first world are holding, stockpiling vaccines if they are to control population? Why do they limit the access of the vaccine to us, Africans, and the global south? Is it because they want our population to increase? No, they know the benefits of vaccines. And each vaccine, why we need to take a vaccine for a different infectious agent, is because the vaccine is very, very specific. It does only one specific task: to stimulate our immune system. The immune system responds by developing specific white cells, what we would call body soldiers, that prevent or fight off that agent currently and into the future. That's what vaccines are. Very specific. If it's for measles, it will be developed and it will identify measles in the future and deal with it. So it's completely false. And I think the only way you can counter is telling them the West, and I think the data you need is that America itself has this number of stockpile for this type of vaccine, for this type of vaccine, for all this type of vaccine, including smallpox. They still have stockpiles, which is already eradicated. In case it shows up again, they will quickly respond to it. The other facts you can do is that, hey, how many of us here got vaccinated?
For what?
For COVID.
3 times.
100%. Twice. 3 times. Now, how many of us who got vaccinated already got a child between then and now? Did the vaccine fail? Yes, she got a child. Many other people got children. The other thing is that all of us here were vaccinated during our childhood. Has that stopped us from getting children? So you can clearly see that it's false what they are talking about. And I think we need to maybe I'll get down with my team and we come up with a fact sheet, so that when they post that, you just fire the fact sheet. Yes, you fire the fact sheet so that let them go back to the drawing board and try to create some new misinformation. But the facts will be out there. Send the facts that on, you fire it back, because we all, 100% of us have been vaccinated several times. Ladies have been vaccinated even for tetanus. Each time they get a child, they will be vaccinated for tetanus. Each time you get a cat or something like you have been vaccinated for tetanus. You travel, you have yellow fever, you have what? All those vaccinations. The people who work in the hotel industry, every year they are vaccinated against typhoid. Any of those ladies not getting children? Any of those young men firing blanks? No. If they are firing blanks, it's for another reason. It's not the vaccines. Okay? So we need those facts to show that we can just respond to their misinformation with real facts. And facts that they personally can relate to and the audience can relate to. I think that will help you, and not just help you, will help our cause as the people who advocate for things that are right for the society. Asante sana. You have a second question?
Not a question, but
yeah.
Just to close on that. So I think that informs that we still need to do a lot of online sensitization, because as far as I know, most people within my age group, they consume a lot of propaganda, and that's what mostly sells online. So if we don't counter this, then it will, because as far as I know, most of people within my age group will not take the vaccine because of the propaganda that they've consumed on the effects of vaccine. So then this tells us that we still have to do a lot of online sensitization and campaigns to educate the youth and the Gen Zs and the millennials that these vaccines are for our own good. They're not against us.
Excellent. And Kamau is adding that we need, like I mentioned earlier, we need to go to the platform where the people are. We cannot tell them to come to where we are. Even when Moses was called by God, he was told to go to a certain mountain. The mountain did not refuse to go to where Moses was. So what did Moses do? We are Moses in this respect. We cannot accept Gen Z and the youth to come to our old non-functional systems. They used to work very well, Kamau, those days. But those days are gone. So they no longer work. So we need to go to the platforms where the young people are and provide the necessary information. And my request that I mentioned earlier is that we need to make this one regular. We cannot be firefighting when an issue comes. We need to make it regular. I don't know whether it's a podcast, whether it's a live chat or something like that, but we can make them regular. So that even among young people, when they argue, they say, okay, let's wait for the next podcast and ask these questions. And then the experts will provide us with facts, rather than people pretending to know things when they do not know. But we also need, in the meantime, Pauline, we need to be able to create a fact sheet about vaccines and simple truths in a language that, simple language, no jargon, that everyone out there who is able to read in English can be able to understand. There will always be naysayers, so we cannot convert 100%, but we want the people to have correct information so that they can make informed decisions. There will still be naysayers. There will still be people who believe in extremes. That's not our concern for now. Our concern is the majority, because even when immunity comes in, you just need to vaccinate about 70% to 80%, and the community will be protected by a feature we call the herd immunity. That most people, if they are immunized, the disease will not be able to jump from one person to the other. Because by the time it's trying to go through Kamau, who is not vaccinated, it passes a barrier that's called Nelson, who is already vaccinated, and stalls there. And therefore, the rest of the community, those naysayers may be left out and protected by that fact. So we just need to get to about 75 to 80, and as a society, we are safe. So I don't know what about time. Yes.
Thank you. I also wanted to say
Oh.
I just want to say one thing. Thank you for your question and your relevance. I want to throw the challenge back to you. As online warriors and the Gen Zs, get those of you who are opinion leaders and in that area, come to us and we give you the facts. So that when you go back online, unaanguka naye.
Kamau is learning very fast. So I was told they already changed anguka naye na inuka naye. Kuanguka did not succeed. But anyway, I wanted to leave, so I just wanted to comment. I went to that space called X space, what we used to call Twitter, and the Ministry of Health has a department on port and surveillance, and I saw photos of them sensitizing people on Mpox. I'm not sure whether young people are involved, but that is an entry point so that young people ask questions, whether that information is young people friendly, and also reaching them. But the point I wanted to emphasize, the reason why we mention Ministry of Health and WHO, those are the people to give you accurate information when it comes to any pandemic or any disease. So it is their responsibility. Any other person can come up with misinformation and rumors. And we can give 3 examples. One, there was a time, and that was like 6 years ago, when these vaccines for girls came in and people insisted it was meant for something else, and sterilizing the young girls. And many people stay away from it. But girls were in school, so some in school were vaccinated. And among those young girls who are vaccinated and who are now told, sasa wewe hutakuwa na mtoto, some of them exposed themselves to sex. And you know what happens during exams? It induces those deliveries, KCP, KCSE. So that is a proof enough that it was a lie. If you see these girls delivering exam rooms and they were vaccinated. He also said I work in the HIV sector. When HIV came, people were told there is no treatment and there will never be any treatment. So when treatment came, free of charge in 2004, people resisted because somebody went and said, these people want to kill you. Sasa wanadanganya nyinyi, wameleta dawa. Hiyo ukimeza utakufa. So only a few people who are brave, who accepted to die, experimented with this drug. Today we have in Kenya the first woman in Tharaka Nithi who went to take ARVs. As an experiment, wengine wakingoja, akikaa 3 months without dying, then we will start treatment. And that lady is still living. So people come with, during COVID, we were talking about a pandemic, but people were talking about infodemic. Infodemic is a situation where rumors probably surpasses the truth, and they were saying if you take vaccine, they bring a lot of science. RNA, DNA stands into one area, you will be like a monkey, all these things will be happening, you will not be able to function as a man. And of course, people took vaccines and they said within 1 year you shall have turned into a monkey. And some of these languages were coming from high-level scientists. And they were saying you cannot work on a vaccine within 1 year. It takes 10 years. How come this one of COVID has come in very brief time? So the infodemic will always be there. Misinformation will always be there. For a very long time, we were dealing with people who thought that even a kiss or a peck in the cheek from a person who has HIV will convert you into a person who has that HIV. And we had to avoid people living with HIV. And nurses were putting on gloves and so on and so forth, even to draw blood. It was all false. So today we are dealing with Mpox. The reason why we joined together to tell the Ministry of Health to take lead is that it is their responsibility to give the facts of any disease, any pandemic, so that people know where the truth is. All those other ones that happen there should not keep people away. Just listen to the World Health Organization and listen to the Ministry of Health and the officials. Thank you very much. With that, I beg to disappear. Oh, it's Pauline to give permission.
Okay, I think, do we have any other questions or we can conclude?
Actually, they don't have.
2 questions, then we conclude the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Kariki, Preferred Caris from IRA. So I like the fact that we're talking about sensitizations and what really needs to be done, because yeah, we might speak and again, at the end of the day, we have to do something. So my really concern is we are all here as stakeholders. NEDs, HF, all those stakeholders are here. The question is, we're talking about the government has started doing some sensitization to some part of the country. What are we really doing at CSO and for the state? What are we really doing? Because if we're talking about waiting for the government to give us information, we don't know when. So what are we doing before everything starts to escalate? And I like the fact, Mr. Kinyanjin, you are noticing that here people are doing the work on X to cover that. As President Zuri here and Mercy, all the information we're talking here, we are posting at X right now, so you can visit the page, like and retweet, because information is power. So what we as a CSO, what are we really doing before anything happens? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Jessica from IREF. I am advocate and also agency. So I have like 2 questions I'd like to ask the panelists. One is about education disruption. So during COVID-19, we saw a global shutdown of the schools for almost a whole year, so which disrupted the syllabus. So how can we ensure that the continuity of education during this pandemic is not disrupted? And also, what measures should we put in place? Another question is in terms of preparedness. So also during COVID, we saw a surge in global funding for pandemic preparedness. How can this funding, how much of this funding is being directed towards Mpox, and how do we ensure sustained financial investments in long-term preparedness, not short-term? Because during COVID, it was just short-term. After COVID, the funding got lost. My last question is also in funding again. COVID-19 exposed gaps in global funding for Africa, particularly in vaccines, right? So vaccine access, so and healthcare resources. What measures are being taken to ensure that Africa is not similarly underfunded in Mpox preparedness and African efforts while we wait for the IPT to be approved? Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Yeah, I think you can go ahead and answer.
Great. So there's a question on what civil society is. Maybe we can start by saying this but also what civil society is doing as we can.
Is what we can strengthen, because we're already doing bits and pieces, is to amplify and to break down the messages. Because those of you who are in the Africa CDC webinar, it was almost like 2 hours, but it got to a point that it became almost like very technical. And so one of the things that we are looking at is how do we break down the information to be user-friendly so that we are able to disseminate and act. You've asked about disruption. Yes, COVID-19 had a lot of disruptions in terms of the measures there, the containment measures, because of the limited movements. So businesses were affected, education was affected. So one of the measures that is being looked at now is, again, I mentioned that the ministry has formed a task force. So one of the key things that they are looking at is how do they handle containment without disrupting education, because the recovery process is really long, and the consequences which come with this, we have issues like mental health. Many young people went through a lot of mental breakdown because of that disruption. The academic year was affected. So there's a lot that is being looked at. But one of the things that I think we can, and I'm looking at it because they've organized for this forum, we can sit together and see collectively different stakeholders, how can we package messages that we can pass on to the ministry? So we can see how do we package them. For example, what are our key concerns beyond sensitization? What are the disruptions that we feel might really affect? We've seen reports around also SGBV, which increased during that time, mental health for sure. So we can see how we can work around that. In terms of sustaining and looking at matters around pandemic preparedness, there is conversations, but I'll say that there are still conversations, which means that the conversations need to move to actionable points. I know there are different organizations. I've seen NOPE in the room. NOPE is funded for our epidemic grant. There is also Stop TB Partnership, who's working around a pandemic conversation. So these are avenues we can pursue and see how do we have a conversation further. And also one of the advocacy I know that NOPE has been having is in the current budgeting. The budget line for pandemics is worded and named as COVID-19. And so there's also conversations there that we can look at and see, can the budget line be renamed to pandemic preparedness so that it's not just handling COVID, because it being named COVID-19, then it becomes a challenge where people can easily use it as an avenue to do each and every other thing. So I think those are the things we can look at, but we're looking forward. We've been working closely with IRF, even in the Mpox conversations that we had, but we're looking forward to probably organizing a national, you guys know how to do this, a national big Twitter conversation on just Mpox, bringing in the experts, but also bringing in people who are in behavior change communication, who can help us package it much better for us to consume the information much better.
Now that Kamau was out, and take his question on funding. The question was about how can we make funding for, how can we prepare for the pandemic, and how can we sustain funding for pandemic preparedness and response. And if I may echo some of the words that Kamau says, first is that there is a draft bill that needs to be pushed through so that it's passed. That will anchor it in Kenyan law. Number two is that there is as a country ourselves, we need to set aside funding that is ring-fenced. Omar had already mentioned about it. Ring-fenced means that the money that's allocated there cannot be withdrawn during any supplementary budget and cannot be used for any other purpose. It is for that purpose only. If that purpose does not materialize, if we do not have a pandemic to deal with, the money remains and moves on to the next financial year. And the next financial year, if you put additional money, the kit continues to grow. We all know that you cannot be over-prepared for a pandemic. So that's why Kamau was insisting on pandemic, on ring-fencing. The additional thing I'd like to throw in is that under social health insurance fund, X amount of money, like I had mentioned, needs to be dedicated to go into that pandemic preparedness kit. So that every year as we contribute, we also know that we are contributing and preparing ourselves for any eventuality. This will make sure that our domestic kit continues to grow and gives us capacity to respond. Why vaccines come to us late is that we wait to be given for free. We do not have our own money to go to the market and say, okay, you're giving it for $100 each. No, I want to buy X amount and I want to buy for 50. We start negotiating from a point where we have money in our hands. When we go there, we want a vaccine and we have nothing. The other thing is that
In addition to this, globally, we now need to be able to negotiate strongly and say, we'll be putting X amount of money for our preparedness. We want that the international community also commits, maybe matches what we already are doing, so that we as a region and as a country, we are prepared and able to deal with this matter. We are also contributing to the global health security. So I think besides looking at the international one, we also need to start doing things at home. And it's possible because from general taxes, the government can put X amount of money for this, and from social health insurance, they can put a certain factor, maybe like a 5% to go into this kitty, so that the country, our ability to respond. Recently, I think we went through an evaluation. I'm yet to see how we scored, because the Global South we usually score very poor. And our interaction with the wild animal. Please notice most, if not all, actually almost all the pandemics we have are agents that cross over from the wild, from the animal ecosystem to the human ecosystem. Because when they come on this side, our bodies have no immunity, have never interacted with them, and therefore we have no way to respond to them, and they quickly take us down. And that's where that is talking about one. Minimize the pandemics coming in, but also be prepared to deal with them when they come in, because you have learned from how the animals have been responding to the various infective agents. So I think at this point we can close. Any other questions that we may have, maybe can be shared with the organizers and we can respond to them. Thank you. Asanteni sana kwa kuja.
Thank you. In case anyone wants an interview with any of the panelists, you can maybe request before they leave. But we want to appreciate you, and apologies for starting late. But thank you for coming, and we hope to see the news. Thank you.
15 years ago and now, there's a very big difference. All the partners here.
We've been able to move away from the early pregnancies, the early marriages, and we've learned as young people there is life as a young person than just running home.